Hey everyone, welcome to the Doctors Are Running Roundtable, where we, a group of doctors of physical therapy, talk about the art and the science of the stuff that we're putting on our feet, and sometimes we talk about other things too. So today, it is Andrea and I that are going to talk about some really big things that you should pay attention to as we transition into the hotter summer months. So today is all about summer and heat training and recommendations to pay attention to as the temperatures really start to rise out there. So, our big conversation today is going into obviously that, and then we're going to actually talk about some of the shoes we're testing right now. We're going to talk about, we often talk about uppers and feel that they don't get as much love as some of the soles, but talk about, hey, when it comes to breathability, that's something we're going to mention. But before we get into this episode, we want to highlight something really important that we do at the end of each month, and we have a DOR Giving. So, Andrea, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so this month's DOR Giving was recommended by our team member, Megan Flynn, and the organization is Girls on the Run. And they're a program that was developed to help young girls recognize their strengths, learn goal setting, build social connection, all while building confidence. Through the program, they learn how teamwork can help in achieving a goal, and they work towards completing a 5K together at the end of the season. To check out more information about Girls on the Run, visit www.girlsontherun.org. I can certainly say that as having participated in kids running programs when I was younger, it was just such a great experience. It gave me confidence. It helped me set goals. It helped me work towards something. So it's so great seeing a program like this exists today. And I think on their website it said they have over 170 different groups across the country, which is amazing. So check out their website to see if there's one in your area.
It's such a cool program to be able to not only give back, but like in a way give it to the next generation and get them excited about running and activity and health. So that's really cool. So please give them a look. We donate again at the end of every month to charities and things that we feel are going to make a major impact in communities, and Girls on the Run is the big one for this month. So thank you, Megan. That was a really excellent choice. So our DOR Subjective is directly inspired today by what we're going to talk about. And the question is, for anybody, again, when you hear these, please respond down in the comments or wherever platform you're on, is what time of day do you usually train, right? So, are you a morning, an afternoon, an evening runner? And then the follow-up is, why do you train during that time of day? So, Andrea, what time of day do you normally train?
Well, now with my new work schedule, I train exclusively in the morning, which I really love. Before, it used to kind of be a mix of morning and evening, but it's nice just having the same schedule every day, getting out there, getting the workout done, and then having the rest of the day to do everything else. In the summer, it's definitely nice because I get out there in the cooler part of the day, which we'll certainly talk about. How about you, Matt? When do you train?
Yeah, I'm usually the same way where for years I've gotten my training done in the morning, and that's because regardless of the time of year, I've known if I get it done in the morning, I know I've got it in, and I don't have to worry about it the rest of the day. This is the same thing I have a lot of either pre or current PT students that always ask me, like, hey, how do I maintain running as I go to grad school or what have you? And I always tell them, get your run done in the morning because you have no idea what's going to show up the rest of the day. And it's easy to make excuses about not getting that run in unless you get it right when you wake up.
But I'm
the same way. I also prefer running when it's much cooler. Despite living in Southern California, I am not a heat person at all. So I really prefer cooler weather. I like it when it's a little darker. And this is also a little egotistical, but I also like being the first one out there because it makes me feel better about myself.
Totally. I love that.
I'm like, I'm tough. I'm out here at 5:30. It must be special. I'm not special, but it makes me feel better about it. But yeah, please comment below. Yeah, on that, on when you train in the morning and why.
There's definitely something about like being out there running as the sun is coming up too. It's just beautiful.
It is beautiful too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's different from running in the evening because in the evening the sun's going down. You're like, I'm going to die if it gets dark out here. A lot of places that I run in. In Monrovia, California, we see tons of bear here and coyote, and there are mountain lions. And it's like, oh yeah, if the sun goes down, I am screwed. So it's like this panic going, I have to get back. Whereas the morning, it's like the sun's coming up. This is better. I'm not going to die unless I get hit by a car. So, but usually I'm not running on the road. So it's
you don't want to see.
different.
You definitely don't want to see a bunch of shining eyes looking back at you when it's getting dark.
No. That has happened to me before up in the mountains, and I was like, oh, but it was a bunch of deer going, what is wrong with this person? But anyway, so on to summer training. So that the reason we're talking about this is oftentimes many people will start to switch some of their runs into the morning because things will just get so hot. Especially, and I'm coming, Andrew, you're going to have to tell me about the temperature in your area, but in Southern California, the temperatures start rising really quick. So we're already hitting, 90s. We'll probably get to triple digits here very shortly. And here, it'll, depending on where you are, if you're by the ocean, it's a little more temperate, but more in the desert where I am, it'll get to like 80, 90 degrees by 8, 9 o'clock. So it's
wow.
If you wait, you're going to be in trouble, and all of a sudden it's going to be a heat run. So that's where, timing your runs become really, really important.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Here in Connecticut, our weather is so variable. It was in the 50s this morning when I went out for my workout, and that is definitely not normal. Last year, we had a horrible summer with like weeks in the 90s and high humidity. So, the saying in New England is if you don't like the weather, just wait a day, it'll be different. And that's definitely been true this year. So normally when I'm running in the morning, it's like in the 60s or 70s. If it's going to be super hot, it might already be 80, but it's never like unbearable if I go out first thing in the morning.
Yeah. So it's usually good, but let's talk about some of the things that people need to pay attention to. And I know you're really excited to talk about temperature versus dew point, but these are both things because these environmental factors have very large influences on our bodies, and they can affect pace, they can affect training. Hydration becomes really, really important, and not just fluid water, but also making sure you're maintaining electrolytes because you're going to be sweating like crazy. So what are temperature considerations, and what should people be paying attention to environmentally as they go out for their training as the temperatures rise?
Oh, sure. So a lot of people you should pay attention to temperature, of course, but more and more runners I hear talking about dew point as the most important thing. And, there are all these dew point charts. If it's above this number, you should reduce your pace by 5 seconds. If it's above this number, you should reduce your pace by 10 seconds. So in preparing for this episode, I decided that I wanted to see what actual research said about that. And I found this really interesting study that was done back in 2012. They looked at the marathon results from all of the world majors of almost 1.9 million runners. And they looked at the temperature, the dew point, the humidity, and the level of pollution on race day. And they found that temperature was the only factor that had any influence on performance. They found that dew point and humidity had almost no influence on performance whatsoever. So that's really interesting for all of the articles that are out there in like popular publications about how dew point should rule our lives. So I think the bottom line is if it's hotter, you might need to adjust your paces. You maybe don't need to use a chart to tell you how much to adjust your paces by, but you really need to learn how to run by feel. What does threshold pace feel like? What does marathon pace feel like? What does 5K pace feel like? Because in the end, that's how you have to race. And if you go out, let's say you're doing a 5K and it's hot and you say, okay, I'm going to reduce my pace by 10 seconds a mile. Well, if you do that in the first mile, you feel like you're dying, you better readjust. So the more you can practice in training, listening to your body, the more natural it's going to be when you're racing. How do you handle like hot temperatures, Matt? Do you go by, I'm going to reduce it by X number of seconds a mile, or you just run by how you feel?
I'm pretty big in running how I feel. There's also the nice motivating factors that I don't want to die while I'm running. So it's like, I don't care what the watch says at this point. I'm just going to get through this.
Yes, good idea.
I think it's also helpful that, I think it's been helpful because I've had a lot of very, very cool people I've gotten to meet over the years that have been of all abilities, but have consistently learned that running by your own personal clock is far more important than what you're seeing on the watch. And the watch is a nice guide, but it doesn't account for things like temperature or altitude or elevation gain or fatigue. And if you really want your body to respond, you got to learn to speak with it and listen to what it's saying. And sometimes it might be saying, hey, I can't handle this. If you're going to keep going, we got to back this off a little bit. How much? I don't know, but I encourage runners to spend some time during runs and workouts, not always looking at their watch and going, pay attention to what you feel internally. It's ironic that we also do this quite a bit in the profession that I work in too. It's going, what are you feeling? Can you pay attention to some of the signs your body's saying? But definitely, especially when it comes to heat, watch pace goes out the window. Like this morning, it was like 75, 80 when I left for my run because I slept in. It was like 7:30, which I don't normally do. But I'm like, I don't care what the pace is. I just want to get through these miles. And, things started slowing down as it got hotter. That's how it goes.
Yep. Yeah.
Not a race, but...
No, it's not. It's just getting out there and getting that time in and not overdoing it and setting yourself back for the rest of the week.
Right.
It's interesting talking about... Oh, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Talking about like not living and dying by your watch. I know several people during their marathons, their watch has malfunctioned and suddenly said that they're doing like 4-minute miles or 15-minute miles. Right. And then they had to run by feel. So even if you're not running in the heat, it's just good to know what a particular pace feels like or a particular effort feels like, because your watch might disappoint you on race day and you've got to rely on yourself in those situations.
Right. Just because it's not on Strava does not mean you didn't run it. So just kind of move forward. You'll be fine. It's in the results, right? They didn't have Strava or GPS watches for a long time. You will be fine. But going back to talking about training in the heat, what we hope you understand from this is sometimes you got to modify things, right? So what if you're at a race, you might need to go, hey, especially from a safety perspective, because people have died, right? There's not very common, but there are also serious medical conditions that can happen from overheating. So your goal should be, hey, if the environment's not set up for like an optimal PR day, how am I going to get through this healthy and finishing the race? Right. And the same can be said for your training, right? If the environment's too nasty out there, there might be some way you need to modify it. Maybe not going out as fast. You may not be able to go out as long. Some of the things that I've been able to do when it's really hot is going, you know what? I don't like training in the evening, but I'm just going to split my long run up where I'm going to get as many miles as I can while it's safe for me as an individual. And then I'm going to add on some miles in the evening when it starts to cool down, just because, my body, I'm not very good at tolerating heat. So I just know that's maybe not the best option for me. But Andrea, what kind of modifications do you make or do you suggest?
So when it's really hot, and let's say I have an easy run to do, like last year when we had so many hot days, I remember one evening it was like 95 degrees out with like 90% humidity. I was supposed to do like an easy hour. I thought there's no way I can do any pace that's easy in this weather. So I ran on the treadmill. Sometimes going outside just isn't the right choice. Now, there are certainly times where you need to get your body used to training in those temperatures, but you need to be really careful. But like on that particular day, I just knew that going outside wasn't going to be productive. As far as when it's hot and I've got a workout to do, I really do go by feel. That's how I'm used to training, both from cycling and running. So I'll tell myself, okay, it's this hot. I'll see how I feel. I think my pace is going to be around this, but I'm really just listening to my body. I know what threshold effort feels like. I know what marathon effort feels like. You can tell by your breathing. You can tell by like how your legs feel. So you just go out and you try to do that effort. And you're going to get a benefit from the workout regardless of how much slower you are, right? As long as you're aiming for a given effort. What would be worse is if you went out and said, I'm tough, I'm the exception to the heat rule, and I'm going to stick to my paces even though it's 85 degrees. That's just setting you up for either heat stroke or overtraining or an injury. So put your ego aside and...
Yeah. And the reason we encourage you to be careful with this is there are some serious consequences that can happen from heat stroke if it gets severe enough in terms of how it affects your body, your brain. And, as people that definitely use their brains for a living for critical thinking and for clinical stuff, I can tell you from having had a little heat stroke, it affects you for days and it feels like you're in a fog. And so it's not worth impacting your either mental health or your brain or the rest of your body for it. So just, you're still going to get a good training effort, but think about, health in the long term. The other area that people often do this is with altitude. Actually, people go, in Southern California, people will go up to Big Bear and go, oh yeah, I'm going to run the same pace. And then you'll see somebody throwing up on the side of the road because they got altitude sickness, trying to do a tempo run at the same pace. And what some of the so Andrea got to have her exciting moment about dew point. I'm going to have my exciting moment about heat training versus altitude training, because the longest time I was told that they were equivalent, that you could do training in the heat and it had the same beneficial effects as training at altitude. And based on the recent research that I've been reading through, that's actually not true. There's two different mechanisms. So training at altitude, you'll get improvements in things like, red blood cells, things like that. You'll see changes in the body's ability to carry oxygen, whereas the impact from heat is generally your plasma volume increases, which that can be helpful, and it can, it can help your heart work harder. It's also a reason to be very careful with heat training, is you can put your heart at risk as well, because that's to pump blood harder. Mm-hmm. But the mechanisms by which those impact have very different impacts long term. So the heat training, when you train in the heat, it really makes you better at running in the heat. When you run at altitude, it does help you with that, but there are some additional performance benefits from altitude that are not attained from heat training. So unless you're specifically going to run a race in the heat, there's no additional benefit from going and running and feeling like you're about ready to melt, is what I'm getting from that. What did you think from the articles that we talked about?
Yeah. One of the interesting things in that article that you sent me was that it's possible that heat training increases your hemoglobin mass, but they're not really sure what the mechanism is, or if that will have the same effect on like VO2 max as altitude training. So certainly more research needs to be done. And I also think they mentioned that a better heat training protocol needs to be developed so that researchers can use similar protocols to make these studies more useful for clinicians, coaches. But yeah, I would agree. It definitely seems like heat training doesn't have quite the same beneficial effects as altitude training, but it will make you pretty good at running in the heat. And interestingly enough, you actually don't need to do that much running in the heat to get acclimated to heat, right? Like you only need about a week or two of running in the heat, no more than like 60 to 90 minutes, I think is what I read. Is that what you're...
Yeah, that was the same thing. It was not as much time as I was expecting, whereas altitude training takes a lot longer, I feel like, for you to adapt and then to actually maintain some of those adaptions. And as soon as you leave, you start losing that stuff really quick.
Yeah. It's funny, you talk about people going up to altitude and trying to like do a tempo run. I am definitely familiar with the heavy hand of altitude when you're trying to go above threshold. It's just like somebody puts their hand on you and says, nope, you're not going, not going that hard.
That's a really great way of describing this. That is exactly what it feels like. Somebody just says, no, this hand comes down on you.
Yes.
I was really lucky to grow up in near, well, if anybody knows this, in Oregon, near Mount Hood, so a little town called Welch's. And it's just off of altitude, so the town itself is fairly low. But then when you get to Mount Hood, and you start getting up toward Timberline Lodge. I used to go up there and train, and there's this steep hill that went up to Timberline Lodge, and it passes that kind of point where you're like, all right, now I'm starting to feel this. And I used to run there, and I was always like, I'm good at hills, except there, because it's just, you have the hill plus altitude.
Right.
I think I threw up so many times on that stupid hill because I'm like, I've got this. No, I don't got this.
Yep. This time altitude won't beat you.
Yeah, just kidding. It will do it every time. So especially, I'm really curious from your background, being a professional cyclist, when you looked at heat training as a runner or a cyclist, what kind of stuff do you think about hydration-wise in terms of hydration strategies?
So, I have tried many, many hydration strategies, and I can tell you what I've found works best for me. One of the most important things that I think a lot of people overlook is pre-hydration or hyperhydration, where you drink something with a very high concentration of sodium. The idea is that that high concentration of sodium is going to draw water into your blood, increasing your plasma volume. So then, like, you're supposed to hyperhydrate either the night before or like 30 minutes before an effort. So you go out, now you've got this increased plasma volume, you go out in the heat, and that's going to help your body cool itself better. It's going to keep you from getting dehydrated as quickly. It's going to help reduce the sodium levels in your sweat, which is important also for maintaining your hydration status. So I would say, like, if our listeners have not looked into hyperhydrating or prehydrating, it's definitely something to consider. One thing to be aware of, though, is you're taking in a ton of sodium. So if you do happen to have high blood pressure or any other condition that affects your ability to excrete sodium, then that type of product probably isn't for you, and you should talk to your doctor about it. Do you prehydrate, Matt? What do you use?
I just learned to, because I was, again, being the Oregonian, I'm like, why should I have to hydrate before the run? It's not that hot. There's what?
No.
Now, California, it's taken me 10 years to figure out, you know what? If I start drinking more fluid beforehand, it's slightly better. But if I actually take in some kind of electrolyte solution, that's even better. Because a lot of people will forget that, if you're just drinking water, that often dilutes your blood. It can actually make you feel worse. So it took me, I'm a little slow. Took me many, many years to figure this out. And we've been really lucky because there's a nutrition guide that we're working on that I've got all this stuff sent to me, and I'm experimenting with it. So I've used everything. I do really, really like Martine, but the only thing I don't like is that they often don't have some of the like electrolyte balances that I like. So I've been messing with some of the classics like Scratch I've used for years, or Fluid, or Tailwind, and just having something that I can sip on like 30 minutes to an hour before I run is very helpful. And what you just said, I have definitely made a much better effort this summer to start hydrating the night before. And I know some people are like, oh, I'm gonna have to wake up to go to the bathroom. I'm lucky enough I haven't had that issue. But it makes it, from a testimonial standpoint, it really makes a really big difference, both on the run, and I found also cognitively after the run. So it's been something that I've been working on. And this is just because my brain has to be going all the time. It's like that. That's what scares me sometimes about long runs of the heat, is I don't want to get my brain messed up, because as soon as I get back, I don't have time to just sit down and relax. I have papers I got to work on. And so, I've been experimenting with the same thing, trying to see what hydration kind of works best. And it just seems like it depends, but really making sure you hydrate before has made a big difference. I'm getting better at hydrating during. For the longest time, I wasn't used to taking, even during like the 2 marathons I've done, I wasn't the biggest fan. I should have practiced that more, but thank goodness I didn't. Nothing horrible happened. I certainly got a stomachache, but that's another thing in terms of, like, if you know you're going to be training in the heat and you know you're going to be racing in the heat, make sure you practice what you're going to do on race day.
Definitely.
During practice. The other place we talk about this, that, geeking out shoe wise, is talking, if you're going to race in a shoe, you better make sure you practice using that shoe and not just jump into it. It's the same thing with nutrition, hydration. Practice it first before race day. Practice with a variety of things, because you never know what's going to show up that day. So if you know that your marathon is going to be using a certain product at the aid stations, then practice with that. Or if there's something that works well for you, consider running with a bottle. But you've got to go into it prepared. I would say the 2 products that have helped me the most in terms of hydration in hot weather are Osmo Preload. That has, I think, 1,500 milligrams of sodium. Take that the night before, or like half hour before. But then in the summertime, like, just to help me keep my electrolyte levels high enough throughout the day, there's this product called Elite that one of the teams I rode for was sponsored by, and it's an electrolyte concentrate. They get it from, like, one of the Great Lakes, and all it is sodium, potassium, and magnesium. And you put, like, half a teaspoon of it in a liter of water. And it, gives it a slightly salty taste, but
I will drink that throughout the day if it's going to be very hot and I'm going to be training, as opposed to just water, because it helps me keep my electrolytes up higher. I also used to use it to salt my vegetables when I was in grad school, because it was, it was convenient and it was there. So my teammates loved that. I also found an additional use for it.
I can very much appreciate that. That's awesome. So not non-hydration related, but my story on that, Andrea, is that's really cool to actually use that for cooking. So my story on that is that when I was working in running stores, what helped me get through grad school is I used to load up, because you get a big discount, or you'd be really nice to the GU or Cliff Rep, and I'd get all of those 100 milligram caffeine gels, and I would take those throughout. Not when I was running, I would take them during class, like 4 or 5 of them throughout the day to keep me going. Not healthy at all. But
no,
not what that was intended for at all. And it's like, I wonder why I have a massive caffeine addiction now. I wonder.
I wonder if you get a health benefit from caffeine goos as much as you do from drinking coffee. You would be a good subject for that.
Probably not, just from like that sugar, out
right.
So very different physiology you're working with. But let's talk about some of the cooling strategies that we have. So we've talked about some of the things like obviously pre-hydration and preload. What are some other things you can do either before, during, or afterwards?
Yeah, so it can help a ton to pre-cool before a training run or a race. So as simple as like staying in air conditioning right before your training, drinking some like pretty cold water, putting a little bit of ice down your back. But when I was bike racing, sometimes you're outside an hour or more before your race starts. It could be 100 degrees out. So we actually used to use ice vests to stay cool, and I still have mine. The brand is Arctic Heat, and basically you activate it by dipping it in cold water, and then you can either put it in the freezer or put it in a cooler. But it stays cold for like 2 hours, and it keeps you very cool leading into your event. And like we would wear it when we were warming up on our trainers. So I could see this being pretty useful like before a marathon where you might be on the starting line for a while, or even a 5K if it's super hot and you can't like hang out inside. They're not cheap, but they're worth it if you're going to be doing a lot of hot racing. What do you do before runs to stay cool?
Cold. My extremely advanced techniques are generally cold water, and that's about it. I'm still 10 years into Southern California. I'm still in that Oregonian mindset going, why do I need it cool? It should be like 50 degrees in the summer here. But it doesn't always happen.
Right.
There's been some triple digits in Oregon the last couple of years when I've not been there. I'm like, why is it hotter in Oregon than Southern California?
Wow.
So
that's
even
not
if I do
normal
head back,
for up there.
Yeah. No. So to be honest, I have not been very strategic with that. Outside of going, let me blast the air conditioning in my car before I get out on this run or what have you. But yeah, have not used, I think, adequate strategies during, for sure. Outside of the only thing I would say is keeping, that is not true. I'm not giving myself enough credit. What I used to do when I was in downtown Pomona and farther east in Southern California, more in the desert, is I would freeze a water bottle before I would go out, so that the night before, and then I would let it thaw a little bit so that as I was running, it still was cold, and as it melted, it gave me more fluid. And this is a trick that I picked up from a friend of mine who was a professional runner back in the day. And so you don't overhydrate, but you get enough fluid and it's still cold was a good strategy before. And I can't believe I forgot. I've not done that for a long time. I can't believe I forgot that.
Yeah, that is a great idea. And it helps you, encourages you to drink while you're running, which is important, especially with longer, harder runs. I would say the best thing that I've done to stay cool during runs, this is another cycling trick. We would use ice socks. So basically you would buy a pair of pantyhose, you would cut the foot off, and then you would maybe put like 6 or 8 ice cubes in there and then tie a knot in the top. So you've got like a little pouch of ice. And for women, you could just stick it in the back of your sports bra or in the front. The guys could do that too because they're wearing bib shorts, so it kind of keeps it on their back. So for female runners, that's super easy. If you're in the middle of a marathon, have one of your family members or friends hand you an eye sock, like at mile 10 and mile 20, and that can really help you stay cool. Guys, I don't know where you would put the eye sock, but you could try. Have you ever done anything like that, Matt, like used ice during a race to stay cool?
Not in that way, not with pantyhose, no. Never. I have to, though. That's a good idea.
Give it a try. You know, I can tell you that the guy, the male cyclists that I knew who did this, you know, they're going into Rite Aid and buying a few packages of pantyhose. They definitely got some interesting looks from the people working there. So you too could have that experience.
Yeah, the poor people at Rite Aid where they have these cycling, they're like, what is going on? This is probably the weirdest convention I've ever seen. What is this? No, I'm just kidding. But that's actually a great, I mean, like having something like that, you know, is good. Although it's hilarious to see like a bunch of like men and women cycling at high speeds going by with pantyhose hanging out the back. Like,
yep.
They chasing.
That is exactly what it looked like. Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah. Hey, but you know what? Especially when it comes, and we referenced this earlier, as much as we joke around, when it comes to performance and to like your health, right? Trying to keep your body temperature regulated, because once you overheat, and we talk about this frequently, the concept of homeostasis, your body really works at a very optimal level. There's a lot of different things. Your blood pH, your temperature is one of them. All these metrics that we measure, right? It's when you go to the doctor, they take your temperature, they take all these blood values. If that kind of goes out of range, it's going to negatively affect a lot of the physiological processes that happen in your body. So if that temperature goes out of whack, you're going to start crashing really hard. So you kind of got to do what you got to do to make sure you maintain that from both performance as well as health. So no judgment on that. You got to do if it involves. I'm not judging if it involves pantyhose. I'm all for it.
Yep. I mean, we're runners. We already do really weird things anyway. So what's one more thing?
Yeah. So speaking of being runners, right? So, did you have one more?
You know, I would just say after running in the heat, it's really important to get your body temperature down as quickly as possible, with the exception of if you're actually trying to acclimate to the heat, then there's studies that show it's good to stay warm for a little bit. But let's say you're not trying to acclimate. You finish a run or a workout in hot weather, you come in, you know, you're still sweating bullets. The sooner you get your body temperature down to normal, the sooner you start recovering from your workout. If you stay hot, you're prolonging your recovery period. And so often what I do is when I'm showering after the workout, I put the cold water on. Not like ice cold, because you don't want to bring your core temperature down that quickly, but just cool. When you get out, you feel kind of back to normal. Whereas if you just took a hot shower, you might get out and like you're still sweating. We've all had that experience, right? Yep. Like you're sweating for an hour after you got back inside. Well, if your core temperature is still elevated, that's prolonging your recovery.
And even if you feel that, I'm cooler on the outside, it's your body's function is protecting all its internal organs. So either organs, your nervous system, and it's going to go, I'm still hot in here. I'm going to try to get as much temperature out of here in any way I can, which oftentimes is getting more fluid out, which means increasing your risk for getting additional dehydration even after you finished. So
exactly. Yeah.
I liked when you said, because I think a lot of people make the mistake of going, I'm just going to get as cold as possible right now. And the problem is you want your body temperature to come down gradually. The body does not like big shifts. There can be things like shock, all things, kind of things that can happen if you bring that down too quick. So just ease it down and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But yeah. Speaking of big shifts, and I was going to reference earlier, speaking of weird things that we do as runners, we're obviously going to talk about some shoes right now. I think the biggest thing that we can bring up is uppers and breathability. And Andrea, we're talking earlier, we actually both have it for the listeners. We're both holding up pairs of the Asics Metaracer. And I remember when this shoe was coming out, they were like, oh, okay, it's got the carbon plate. But the biggest thing was, hey, this is a super breathable upper. And this thing in the front here is actually not a USB 8 port, which I thought at first. I was like, wow, it's a smart... I'm just kidding. That was dumb. But apparently they were talking about the fact that if you improved the breathability, the upper, and the cooling, it could improve your economy or something. But I don't remember what it was. But something improved by 1%. And I don't think I really felt that very much, but it's an interesting concept to think about. Again, uppers and how they might affect performance and try to keep something cool. I haven't looked at this shoe for a while. I think I kept it just because it looked really, really cool. But I kind of like your
Me either, yeah. It was in my closet. I was like, oh, look, it does have that port in front for breathability. Yeah.
And I totally stole the joke about the USB port. Somebody else posted that, and I was like, "That's funny. I'm gonna use this joke."
Well, someday. Is it a micro USB or a regular USB?
That's a good question. Do any of these? Let me see.
It doesn't look standard to me.
For the viewers, I'm gonna stick a USB. It actually fits really nicely.
Look at that. That's perfect.
The shoe did not light up. It is not, in fact, it is not a smart shoe at all. I'm sorry.
Maybe Asics could be testing a prototype that plugs in.
Yeah, there was a prototype. There was some smart shoe, and I think this is like 20, 30 years ago that they had a like mechanical shoe or something that was supposed to adapt its cushioning to you. I can't remember if this was Asics or Adidas. Gosh. Somebody's going to call me out for messing it up, but I don't remember who did that.
Wow.
But that was the thing, and I'm kind of like, we haven't seen that. But again, that's hard to put electronics... Under Armour's done that where they've put electronics in the shoe, but it's hard to do that with something it's not gonna last as long as you might hope. But anyway, back on topic. So what we're gonna talk about is uppers and breathability, and this is often something people don't think about until their feet start sweating like crazy. And I remember the first moment when I was working in running stores years ago, and I'm like, what is this breathability? And there's one particularly humid and hot day, and I'm like, oh, I've got blisters on my feet despite having nice socks, and I can feel my feet sweating. That's so gross. So when you're looking at breathability for uppers, what do you pay attention to?
Well, looking at the mesh, can you see through it? That's usually a sign that it's breathable. Put your hand in there and just feel how thick it is. So I would say... like the Metaracer, I didn't find that it was exceptionally breathable, but I'll show you some shoes that I have found exceptionally breathable. The New Balance Pacer SC, you can see, the shoe is practically see-through. You can see your entire sock when you're wearing it. You can actually feel that your foot is breathing better in the Pacer SC. I've got to say the most breathable shoe that I've worn is one that we just got in for testing, the Endorphin Pro 3. You've got to check out the tongue with the holes.
Yes.
So, yes, that's awesome. This is a very breathable shoe. And this mesh is very breathable. I've been testing it since I got it, and we've had some warm days, and I would definitely say my foot feels like it's getting more ventilation. What are some of your favorite breathable shoes?
So they're in the other room, and I forgot to bring them over. But the Endorphin Pro 3 from Saucony, which heads up is currently my shoe of the year. It's blown everything out of the water. So it's been really fun.
Amazing.
That is definitely one. I'm going to compare it to something where the new. Why can't I talk right now? The Adidas Adios Pro 3, this is the 2 that I'm holding up for listeners, also has a super breathable upper. There's a new mesh there that feels really good, and it ventilates super well. And I've actually taken that out during lunch in the middle of some of our hot days here, and it's been great. It's very different from some of the, I don't know what you would call this, but some of these kind of very thin mesh materials that are almost plasticky. These ones don't tend to breathe very well. I tend to find these really hold sweat in quite a bit. They can be nice on cooler days where it keeps your feet warm, but the new Adios Pro 3 has a very light mesh that ventilates extremely well. So I think those two in particular have been very, very good. And that's also good because I'm usually taking those out when I'm moving faster and sweating more. So it's definitely made something I've noticed where I come back and I'm like, my socks are not totally soaked in sweat. And different people will notice this, I think. It is nice. Certain people sweat more or less. I think over the years I've started sweating more, and maybe that's because I'm actually hydrating for once in my life. But yeah, it's just one of those things where upper breathability can make a really big deal, especially for anybody that's prone to blisters, which again, all of a sudden I've had some issues with those over the last couple months, and not anything to the shoes are great. There's even some ones that I've run in before, but breathability and keeping your feet cool can be really important. And nobody wants to have hot feet. It's really gross.
No. And of course, we lose a lot of heat through our feet. That's why in the winter, if you put socks on, you'll feel much warmer than if you're walking around barefoot. So in the summer, if you have shoes that give you better ventilation, breathability, it's going to make your whole body feel cooler. Same thing as wearing a hat. You wear a hat in the winter to stay warm. You want to keep your head uncovered in the summer to let all of that heat escape.
Yeah. Real, so footwear choice, especially when it comes to that stuff, is really, really important. And I'd say, like Andrea had mentioned earlier, looking at the upper and going, hey, are there ventilation holes? How thick is it? How thin is it? What type of material they're using? And then also testing it, because each person's a little bit different. But I think people are getting better about doing that. And we're talking about heat, talking about warm uppers. We'll talk about that in about 6-7 months. Not now.
Yes.
But any last thoughts on shoe things on cooling? I'm still so fascinated that I totally forgot about the Asics and the cooling shoe.
Well, now we've got to see if Asics has put this feature in any of their other shoes, Matt.
I don't think so. I don't remember.
No, just the Metaracer.
I don't think, because I've got the Edge in the Sky here. And that's decent. It's still kind of a little thick. It's a see-through mesh. And for the viewers, I'm holding up the Edge Plus, which has been a really, really great shoe. But I don't think I've seen that. Yeah, the end is closed there. No leaking of the upper.
Well, yeah, and I don't know about you, but I never ran in the Metaracer in the rain. So what do you think that hole will do for you in rainy conditions? Will it be good or bad?
I have, and it looks like my shoe is peeing. Sorry.
And you haven't made a video of that?
This was a long time ago, before we were as good as we are at some of the media stuff, thanks to Bach. But yeah, this was back when I was living in Azusa, and it just was a year where it was pouring rain. And I was like, I was determined, I'm going to do a workout. I'm going to get enough miles on this shoe because I want to get this review out as fast as possible. So it's pouring rain. I'm running through puddles, and I'm standing in front of the door to our apartment, and I look down and realize my shoes are leaking out the front as I'm going forward. Every time I step, it squish, and it like spurts out the front. I'm like, that's weird. So yeah. It's an interesting episode that we're having here.
Yeah, now we know.
Yeah, that they can sometimes do that. So
yes.
Any last thoughts on footwear choice and heat?
You know, the other shoe that I've been that I tested recently that's pretty breathable is the Topo Spectre. Mm-hmm. You can see nice thin mesh, nice holes. When you're running, you can actually feel the air coming in. Yeah. So that's nice because this shoe can be used for a variety of paces. Like the other shoes we've been talking about are more race or interval shoes. Right. But, you know, I love the Spectre for easy runs, intervals, long runs. So it's nice to have another breathable option for sure.
And I can't believe I forgot this, but the Spectre was the shoe I took with me to my wife and I went to a wedding recently in Kauai, and it was so humid, but it did really well. It breathed really, really well. And I had the same experience where it was, that's where that was really important. And I'm just like heat, I'm a huge humidity wimp. So anybody on the East Coast, which tends to get more humidity, you're far tougher than I am. I'm just going to put that out there because it's tough. But on a more serious note, so one of the things that we geeked out on shoes, we talked about temperature, but some of the other things we want to have you pay attention to is, as runners, oftentimes we're outside a lot more than others. And while that's really, really good to get some fresh air, and there's lots of good research on the importance of getting outside, there are some things to pay really, really close attention to, and some of this hits, close to home. Especially for, I'm going to say this here, I've had a bout with melanoma previously, and I can thank my mother, who was a family doc, for always checking my skin. I thought it was weird. She'd grab me and then pull my shirt up going, let me look at your moles. Thank goodness she did that, because she found one time and was able to get that removed. So want to encourage runners, if you're female and you're wearing just a sports bra, if you're a male and you're running shirtless, Please make sure you're wearing sunscreen, and if you see any abnormal moles, please make sure you are checking with your dermatologist or family physician, an MD or DO, that this is on the right way, because we also see this in our field all the time, because being people that work with people that are often having to go, hey, can you take your shirt off? Can we see how the muscles are moving? That kind of stuff. You'll see all this stuff, and we often refer people. I've had probably 4 or 5 in my short career already that I've gone, hey, you need to go check this out, and sure enough, they were full-blown melanoma. So
Yeah.
I'm not a dermatologist or skin specialist, but really encourage people, keep an eye on your skin and skin protection. And Andrea, again, what kind of things should people be looking for, and what should they use in terms of sunscreen and protection, other things to pay attention to?
Well, I think Matt hit the nail on the head. Like, keep an eye on your skin, especially if you're running shirtless. But the other thing is, look in the places that are places you don't normally look, like the back of your knees, the back of your arms, the back of your neck, your ears. The sun hits all of those places, and those are really common places to get skin cancer. So if you can't look in all of those spots, if it's hard with a mirror, have a friend or a family member do it. But getting a yearly skin check with a dermatologist is a really good idea. I've also had some precancerous spots taken off, and it's no big deal. You know, I think a lot of people think about, oh, if I go to the dermatologist, they're going to like make me stand there naked and look at me. That's not how it is. It's, you know, they keep you covered and just look at one part at a time. But it's so much better to get it caught early, where they can just freeze it off with liquid nitrogen or do a little biopsy, than to let it get out of hand and potentially become life-threatening. So you want to be using sunscreen every time you go outside. I would mention that the types of sunscreens that are available, the recommendations are starting to change. There's one particular product ingredient in sunscreen called oxybenzone that the FDA is really looking into as to whether or not it should be used in sunscreen anymore. Our skin absorbs it much more readily than other sunscreen chemicals, and it actually could be an endocrine disruptor. So many sunscreen companies have actually taken oxybenzone out of their products, but definitely read the labels. You don't want anything with oxybenzone. It also is bad for a coral reef. So a lot of like island nations, Hawaii actually has banned it too because of what it does to the coral. So Matt, there's a mnemonic for people to take a look at any spots they might have on their skin and decide, like, is this normal or is it not? And what is that mnemonic?
So the way I was actually taught was only with 4 letters, and then I learned there's a 5th one when I was in PT school. So that's A,
Yes.
B, C, D, E. And that stands for, A stands for asymmetry, meaning when you're looking at a skin lesion, and when I say lesion, I know that sounds scary, it just refers to like kind of abnormal tissue. But when let's say a mole, you're looking at a mole, is it symmetrical or is it asymmetrical? Asymmetrical patterns are something to go, hey, I might want to pay attention to that. B stands for border. Is the border, smooth, or is it very irregular? So anything that looks weird is something that starts to trigger some alarms. Color is the other thing. If you're seeing, it's either straight brown, that's fine. You're going to have to ask dermatologists about some of the other colors, but when it starts to get really abnormal and there's a variety of colors in there, that's when you start to going, uh-oh. Diameter is the other thing, kind of the classic thing I was told by the dermatologist that taught me before and during school was that if things start to get larger, that I think it was the eraser of a pencil, that's when things start to get concerning. Have you heard something similar or different?
Yep.
Is that changing? Okay.
Yeah, pencil eraser, yeah.
Pencil eraser is the kind of the classic. And the last one, E, is evolution. Is it changing? If something's staying the same, there's a little less to be concerned about it. But if it's like it's starting to grow and it's looking all weird, if it's starting to rise up and it's going beyond the skin, that's when you need to go, okay, I need to get this checked out. And again, please don't self-diagnose. And we also, as physical therapists, don't diagnose this at all.
No.
This is a immediate referral. So please go see a dermatologist or go talk to your family physician that's an MD or DO and get that checked out so you can get to the right people. And so we don't want to make you panic, but it's more going, you know what? This is something that's very easy preventable, so just keep an eye on it, just in case.
Right. Yep. When in doubt, just get it checked out. It's better to have them say it's nothing than to not get it looked at and have it have been something.
Yeah. I still remember like one of my apprehensions of going to the dermatologist, had this kind of mild obsession with popping pimples for a while. And I was like, oh, they're going to judge me. Like, this is not going to, like, I'm so scared. And I get in there and I was like, they didn't even say anything. And I'm like, is that something? Like, yeah, I noticed people do that all the time. That's normal. And I'm like, I thought you were going to judge me on that. And the dermatologist goes, I thought you were going to judge me on my posture. And I was like, oh, okay. We're all worried about things. So
right. Yep.
It's fine. Just don't, there's no bad posture. Just don't spend too long in that position. Get out of it.
Exactly. Yes.
So, yeah. Don't worry about that stuff. So it's fine. Anything else sun related that you want to bring up? There's some other topics that we talked about earlier that I'm really curious that people should be aware of.
Yeah, so I don't think a lot of people are aware that a lot of common medications can increase your sun sensitivity. So out here in New England, Lyme disease is a really common problem. You get bitten by a tick, it transmits this bacteria, and it can make you pretty sick. And the treatment for that is going on an antibiotic called doxycycline, which you're usually on for a minimum of 2 weeks and sometimes 4 weeks. Doxycycline can make you horribly sensitive to the sun. So if you're on it and you're still going to go outside, you need to be wearing long sleeves, long pants. If it's the summertime, you can get sun sleeves and sun pants, but any exposed skin is at really high risk of getting burned. So just be aware of that, because I know so many people who have gotten Lyme disease and they weren't aware that doxycycline could make them so sensitive, and they got really fried. Surprisingly, I was looking this up prior to our recording tonight, Matt. There are a bunch of other really common medications that also can cause skin sensitivity, which I didn't even know. Antihistamines, NSAIDs, meaning like ibuprofen or Advil, naproxen or Aleve. So they don't make you as sensitive as doxycycline, but they can still increase your skin sensitivity. Another one that can increase skin sensitivity is oral birth control. And of course, there are a ton of people on that. So it's just something to be aware of. If you're on any of those medications, your need for sunscreen and possibly additional protection like sun sleeves is just even more important.
Yeah, we were talking before this episode, and you were telling me like the NSAID stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it's not something we prefer to have, but I'm, again, very lucky to work in a situation where I get to work with, physician assistants, PAs, and MDDOs directly seeing patients. So we have this really cool thing at the Spine Center. And we don't want people to stay on that forever, but we'll definitely give people that stuff. And then I didn't realize, hey, it's Southern California. You are right. I didn't realize we increased your sin sensitivity. So you learn stuff all the time. So it's like, oh my gosh. The other thing we got to give a shout out to is, so our optometrist and ophthalmologist friends would love, obviously, to not get left out here, is that eye protection from the sun can also be really important on those really, really bright days. So, there's a variety of sunglasses, stuff like that. I am not an expert in eyewear, and I will not pretend to be, but having something to protect your eye, especially from those longer days, because at the end of the day, remember, the tissue, especially in your eyes, right, is it's looking for information all the time, and that glare can make some impacts there. So if you're out in some place that's super bright and you're in the middle of the day, you might want to consider some protective eyewear, but that's also why I run in the morning, because I like running when it's not as bright.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I think the most important thing is make sure that the sunglasses that you pick block 99 to 100% of both UVA and UVB rays. If you're just buying fashion sunglasses, they might not provide much, if any, UV protection. So look at, the package or the label and make sure they say that they provide 99 to 100% protection for both. Another thing that I wasn't aware of until I looked it up is just all of the things that increased sun exposure can cause in the eye, including cataracts, macular degeneration. You can actually burn your cornea if you're exposed to too much sunlight. And of course, you have skin on your eyelids, and you can get skin cancer there. And most of us aren't putting sunscreen there because it's immediately going to go in your eyes, right? So the only way you can protect that skin is with wearing sunglasses. So if you're running in direct sunlight, you should really be wearing sunglasses more often than not. And of course, even on cloudy days, there's still plenty of UV rays. So might be a good idea to wear sunglasses for most of your runs, just for adequate protection.
Andrea didn't tell me about the sunburned eyeballs thing before we did this recording, and now I'm really bothered. So
Matt's going to go out and buy several pairs of sunglasses.
I'm terrified. Like, I'm going to burn my eyeballs out. Oh, gosh.
Well, I don't think they fall out. They just get burnt.
They get burnt. Maybe I want them to fall out when they get burnt. Oh, gosh. Have you had that happen?
No, I've had a scratched cornea, though, and that is one of the most awful things.
Yeah.
And I have no idea how I scratched it, but, I mean, I had to stay home from work because I would have scared my patients with, yeah.
Well, on that note, I think, pun totally intended, we have shined a lot of light on some different topics and related to making sure you have sun protection. Things definitely heated up a little bit with some of our conversations about summer training. I'll stop. I'm sorry. But so
love the puns, Matt. I know you're planning those out.
They were planned. I actually wrote them out beforehand.
Awesome.
So we hope that was helpful because these are really big things that I think Andrea and I, both who have trained for years, have just kind of picked up over the years of learning, and then also found this can be very helpful for people because you also see issues that people come in. They're going, "Hey, I'm having this musculoskeletal complaint," and sometimes it's actually just them cramping from dehydration and what have you.
Yep.
I get a lot of my older population that I work with. They'll be cramping because literally the only fluid they take in is wine and coffee, and it's like you're getting cramping.
Yes.
It's not muscle related. You need not drink something other fluid. So we hope people learn something from this, and then we hope you know that, again, as physical therapists, we have our certain areas of expertise, but we also want you to reach out to others who have their expertise. So again, encouraging people to see their dermatologists, checking with their primary care physicians, and just be safe out there because we want you to have fun, but also at the same time, be safe and kind of learn what's necessary to make sure you get through your run. It's not to be paranoid, it's just to be safe. So we appreciate you listening. And again, we have lots of cool episodes coming out. We've got a lot of reviews coming out as well. Have tons of super shoes right now that we're all testing and trying to get reviews out. So stay tuned. We're going to have some very cool guests coming up in the next couple weeks that I am super excited for. And you'll find us on all different platforms. So you'll see us here on Spotify, on YouTube, on all kinds of places. And then also social media wise, we're on Facebook, Instagram. Bach would like us to tell you that he is doing awesome work on LinkedIn, and that is blowing up all over the place. We've got other pages that you're welcome to follow us on. We also have a Strava group. Again, all kinds of places to get information about what we're doing and some of the information we're putting out there. And we hope that the information we're putting out is helpful. And so always, we're always open to feedback. So if you could, again, leave a comment below, let us know what you think. If you could answer the subjective question, you can answer even what have you tried to plug into this little hole at the end of the Asics Metaracer. I've tried a USB-C port and the shoe didn't turn on, so it's clearly defective. But anyway, please like, follow, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you're looking for. Let us know how your summer training's going, and we hope you stay cool out there and have a great weekend, weekday, whatever time you're listening to this.